bring these up for you today.
Good.
After Saturday, I'm okay. We might be able to open a window a little bit.
The spring on my garage door broke Friday night. And usually it helps, putting that door down to give me a buffer on that whole wall that's on the garage. So. Are you ready?
Yes.
Actually, I wasn't asking you. I was asking the person who matters, Deb. You can be ready or not ready.
You're right about
It won't make a difference.
Always good to know where you are, man. Senator.
We'll open the hearing on Senate Bill 55. There we go. And ask the prime sponsor to come up and introduce the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and honorable members of the Finance Committee. For the record, my name is Senator Carrie Gendro, and I represent District 1, which is made up of 1 city and 57 towns. I will not name them all, but I will tell you this, some of those little towns have more moose than people. It is my honor to present Senate Bill 55, which is asking for an appropriation of $25 million for the Cannon Mountain Tramway. We have the bipartisan support and the geographic diversity. On June 28, 1938, the maiden voyage of the first North American passenger tram took place at our very own Cannon Mountain in Franconia Notch. The tram quickly became a major tourist attraction, carrying 163,000 passengers that very first year. This year is the 85th anniversary since the first voyage of taking visitors to and from that 4,180-foot summit. The fact that it was even built is a tribute to the vision of a few men and the foresight of the New Hampshire legislature. Alexander Bright, a famous skier, came up with the idea of building a tramway in New Hampshire during his trip to Europe as a member of the U.S. Olympic ski team in 1933. He recognized that building one in New Hampshire could promote the growth of skiing and summer tourism in the White Mountains. The current tramway is over 40 years old, and its systems are in need of large upgrades, and the parts are becoming harder to find. A replacement has become a necessity. The tram truly is an iconic destination. Again, I want to thank my colleagues in the Senate and the House who have recognized the importance of this bill supporting the tram, and I appreciate your consideration on supporting Senate Bill 55.
Do any of the senators have a question? Senator Rosenwald. Whoa.
Sorry about that. Do you know if federal funds are available for this purpose?
That is a question that we have to ask.
Additional questions? Senator Del Song.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator. Thanks so much for coming before us. Senator, where did the $25 million figure come from? Who generated that figure?
I do have some people behind me that could probably answer it better than I can, but I know a few years ago they started gathering engineering information and pricing, and so that's where that numbers come from. But they can answer it better than I can.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. You're welcome. Thank you.
Additional questions?
That's good.
Okay, just noting in the bill that it does say fiscal year ending June 30th, 2023, so that somehow they believe it's going to come out of this year's funds. So, all right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Executive Counselor Joe Kenny. Hit your button and we can hear you.
I've been in the Senate. How many years? 14 years to be exact. Good afternoon. I'm Joe Kenny, the District 1 Executive Council. I'm here today to ask for your support for Senate Bill 55 to make the appropriations for the Cannon Mountain Tramway. Over the past several years, I've had the pleasure of representing the North Country in its many wonderful northern parks. It's been my honor to host Governor Council meeting at the Week State Park in Lancaster, Franconia Notch State Park in Franconia, and the Mount Washington State Park in the Sherman Adams Building. Each experience has been educational and exhilarating. We are fortunate to live in this great state full of natural resources and a great state park system. 2 years ago, I arranged with purpose to hold a Governor Council meeting in the Peabody Lodge at the Franconia Notch State Park in Franconia. The reason for this was to make the Cannon Mountain Tram and its future a point of discussion. At the meeting, the Department of Natural and Cultural Resources Commissioner Sarah Stewart and Cannon Mountain General Manager John DeVivo were the ones who articulated the need to understand that the tram is coming to the end of its current 40-year life cycle. The intent of the presentation was to educate the governor and council on the importance of this iconic asset and to recognize that the equipment, parts, and supplies to support the tram in the future will likely become obsolete. And many of the present day equipment pieces have limited lifespan and need to be replaced. The tram today is a moneymaker, bringing in over $2 million in revenue for our state park system in FY 2022. It's also a complementary piece to the Franconia Notch State Park, as this park is constantly being recognized as one of the best in the country. But what makes Franconia Notch State Park and the tram a great experience is not only its majestic views, but the state park and employees who are proud to serve and are full of morale and enthusiasm when visitors come to witness our great state. The time is now to create a Tram 3 at Cannon Mountain so that future generations can have the same experiences that their parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents have had in the past. It is our responsibility to preserve the iconic structure as much as it has been to preserve the memory of the old man of the mountain. I ask for your support for this important appropriation. Thank you.
Questions from?
Just a quick clarification question. You mentioned that the tram's a moneymaker, it brings in $2 million. Is that $2 million in revenue or $2 million in profit after expenses each year?
That's just $2 million in revenue.
Okay, thank you.
And to answer a couple of the other questions, the federal money piece, and I'm sure the folks behind me with the NCR will answer this, but like any federal money, whether it's ARPA money or through GOPR or there's an opportunity to look at some of this federal money that might support something like this, but that's going to have to be a decision that's going to see if it's in the governor's budget or if it's something that the legislature wants to approach as well. And then I think Senator D'Alessandro, you had a question as well.
Yeah.
Certainly, Senator. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, thank you for coming, Councilor. The appropriation the appropriation is being asked for maintenance and operation of the tramway. What does that mean? Maintenance and operation. And it doesn't sound like replacement. It sounds a little bit like repair, but maintenance and operation. Am I to gather from that the operation is good, but it needs to be upgraded somehow, and there needs to be major maintenance? I mean, that's a lot different than an appropriation to replace or to build. Those are key words in this document at this point in time.
I think the plan that the Cannon State Park folks have in place, from what I understand, is that they do have to replace some key parts and equipment pieces for this. And I got to believe that a full replacement would probably be a lot more than $25 million. So, but I think this is just to upgrade it and to make it, last hopefully for many more decades to come.
I think that the department, Sarah, is next on the hit list, And she may have a more complete answer for that question.
Yeah, I think she will.
Okay, thank you.
Additional questions from the senators?
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you very much. And as announced, come on up.
From the greatest hit list. Good afternoon. I am Sarah Stewart, Commissioner of the Department of Natural and Cultural Resources, which is home to 5 divisions. State Parks is why we're here today, the Division of Forests and Lands, the State Library, the Division of Historical Resources, and the New Hampshire State Council on the Arts. With me is Brian Wilson, not of the Beach Boys, but of the State Parks. He's our new Director of the Division of Parks and Recreation. And also with us is John DeVivo, who is the manager of Franconia Notch State Park. We will be able to answer your questions. And we did pass around a testimony and a fact sheet, double-sided. And at this point, I would like for Brian to join me and to share his testimony.
Welcome.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, committee members. I'm Brian Wilson. Yes.
Senator, can you have him speak louder? We've gotten those that it's hard to hear.
All right.
Can you speak louder too?
And me too. I'll pull my mic closer, and you guys can pull your mic closer.
Absolutely. Dear Chair Gray and members of the committee, please accept this testimony on behalf of the Department of Natural and Cultural Resources, Division of Parks and Recreation regarding Senate Bill 55, making an appropriation for the Cannon Mountain Tramway, referred to as the TRAM. The department appreciates the sponsors of the bill in bringing this decision before the New Hampshire legislature, as the original Tram 1 and Tram 2 were both legislative initiatives. In 1934, Governor Winnett assigned a committee to survey the White Mountains for the best site to install the first tram in North America. Cannon Mountain was unanimously chosen. In 1937, legislation passed to support the financing of the tram, and it was built with the help of 200 Civilian Conservation Corps workers, beginning the construction of Franconia Notch State Park. The first tram opened to much fanfare in 1938 and operated for 42 years. With support from the legislature again, Tram 2 was licensed in February of 1980 and has been operating for 43 years. The tram is one of the leading daily spring, summer, and fall attractions in all of New Hampshire. During the winter, the tram services the ski area clientele 3 to 4 days a week, providing supplemental access to Cannon's 4,080-foot summit. Since its installation in 1980, the current tram has transported over 8 million park visitors to the summit. After over 40 years in year-round operations, the tram's primary systems, such as the cars themselves, the hanger arms, carriage trolleys, and the electromagnetical componentry, the motor and braking systems need to be replaced. Each of these systems has an estimated lifespan of 3 to 5 years. In 2020, the department presented to the Capital Budget Oversight Committee its forthcoming need to address the future of the tram. In preparation, we solicited studies to explore various options, including construction of a new tram versus a gondola system. Last February, we held a public information session and solicited public feedback about these options. There was overwhelming public support for the replacement of a tram versus installing a gondola. Further detail on these reports can be found on our website with a link provided at the bottom of this testimony. The department has reviewed various tram size, speed, and other variables, and we are currently working with the Department of Administrative Services, Division of Public Works, to establish a Phase 1 engineering study to allow us to prepare if and when funding is appropriated. And that's where our $25 million estimate has come from, with the support of DAS. Timing is especially critical when because the manufacturer of the current tram has notified us that key replacement parts will no longer be available in the near future. We are concerned that without funding and a plan to replace, the tram will not be able to service in the near future. In consultation with DAS, Division of Public Works, we have been provided with an estimate of $25 million to address the identified needs. The tram is a major feature of Franconia Notch State Park, a routinely top-rated state park in the country. People from all over the world travel to Franconia Notch State Park to walk the Flume Gorge, rent a paddle boat on Echo Lake, camp at Lafayette Campground, or remember the Old Man of the Mountain, or ride the tram to get sweeping views of the Notch and spend time above 4,000 feet. The overall success of Franconia Notch State Park directly supports the greater New Hampshire State Park system. We can predict that losing a key feature of Franconia Notch State Park experience will have a negative impact on the overall enterprise system. An investment in Tram 3 helps maintain the diverse attractions that draw millions of visitors to Franconia Notch State Park. I also lay out in the testimony the intent of the state park system, which I won't read today, but we feel that each of the 4 main priorities, it directly correlates to what we consider Franconia Notch State Park to be as our flagship state park, which we're very proud of. We appreciate your consideration to reinvest in the state's only tram, preserving the opportunity for future generations to experience a part of New Hampshire that has been considered by some as iconic and to us as a critical financial component that directly meets the statutory intent prescribed for the state park system. Thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony on Senate Bill 55.
Questions from the committee? Senator Bradley.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I have several. So there's been discussion about the possibility of a gondola as opposed to a tram. Am I correct in assuming that if there was a gondola, due to the winds coming over the ridge, that a gondola would not be able to run on as many days as a tram runs?
Yes, that assumption is correct. There's quite a bit of engineering that goes into its installation of any ski lift, gondola, or the tram in this case, and that's what engineers that have worked for both gondola and the current tram manufacturer have indicated to us.
Second, if I could, would a gondola require major alterations to both the Summit building and the base station building that a tram doesn't require?
Yes.
So that would be an additional cost to a
Yes.
gondola. And lastly, and this is, I guess, your opinion, but based on your knowledge, and you're more expert than us, if a gondola were chosen, would it generate the kind of revenue? In other words, would it be the kind of attraction that people would use to get to the summit of Cannon Mountain as opposed to the tram?
In our opinion, no, it would not. You can ride gondolas at several other ski area resorts in the White Mountains and through New Hampshire. What makes the tram unique is it's the only one in the state and one of 2 in the Northeast.
And so then, if I might, Mr. Chair, it's conceivable that it wouldn't even be profitable to run a gondola in the summer. Would that be correct?
We've had an industry consultant provide us an analysis on the gondola option that was primarily focused on looking at capacity. So in some of those, in that analysis, it looked at what factors we would want to consider in having the opportunity to either move more people from the base to the summit. However, it was really from kind of the winter season perspective. It would be just a completely different element for us, which I think we would have to speculate on for the summer season.
But in your expert view, the summer and fall revenue, which is the $2+ million, would be severely diminished, and if that were to be the case, severely diminish the amount of revenue that Franconia Notch State Park dedicates to other state parks that they're all supposed to be self-funded, but let's face it, it's Hampton, it's Cannon, that really provide the bulk of the funding.
Thank you for the question. We strongly believe that having a tram, the only tram in the state, is a major attraction to Franconia Notch State Park. If we were to only have a gondola, to follow up on your question about wind, We would have to lower the height of the ride significantly, potentially below tree line, which would also detract from the experience, therefore reducing interest.
If I can continue.
Okay, Senator Birdsall is waiting in the wings.
So the testimony in the letter is about replacement parts being unavailable at a point in time in the near future that would potentially render the tram inoperable. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And so any upgrades to try to keep the tram running as long as possible in some regard is throwing good money after bad?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
I think I'll stop there. Thank you. The chair was very eloquent.
The chair, having gotten some information, Senator Birdsall does have a question.
Thanks for taking my question. Kind of dovetailing on what Senator Bradley was discussing. She says the timing is especially critical because the manufacturer of the current tram has notified us that replacement parts will no longer be available. Once this is repaired and it's in working order, how long is its capability?
So what we've learned so far in our 85-year history is that these have an approximately 40-year lifespan before it becomes antiquated. So our work consulting with Doppelmayr, who's the manufacturer of the current tramway, and with Public Works, we believe that the maintenance costs out of the gate with new systems would reduce from what our current annual maintenance costs are, similar to that of getting a new car. At some point, you hit a point of diminishing returns with your car as it ages. So we feel that we're at that juncture now where the investment all up front and the downtime of kind of strategically focusing the downtime for that replacement would minimize the period of time where we're not able to carry people, and also it would. Sorry, I just lost my train of thought. It would with everything brand new, the maintenance plan would be far less than it is currently.
One last question.
One more question for Senator Birdsall.
So if this was all maintained and ready to go, then the next step would be actually a brand new tram and system.
So there's a lot of different components to the tram system. So for instance, what we're asking for or what's being asked for here is the components that are listed in the testimony. So it doesn't include the towers and the cabling, for instance, as well as the mechanisms that receive at the base and at the summit, the steel superstructure of where the tram comes in. That is all infrastructure that will be able to stay in place. That also will have a lifespan, but that's part of the work that we're working on now with Public Works, is to make sure that we've got many years, decades of lifespan left in those structures before we go out to get certain components here. We want to make sure that we're getting everything that we need and kind of playing out the lifespan of the full system.
Thank you.
If I could just add, the tower, when we say towers, the tram currently has 3 towers. The base building is a tower, there's a middle tower, and a summit tower. Am I right, JD? There's one more? Is there one more?
3 towers
And the base. So we're testing the security of these existing towers with the hope that we don't have to invest in them for this Tram 3 request. If we were to go to a gondola, the estimate would be we would need to remove those and add 18 towers. So that would be a big investment as well.
Senator Rosenbaum.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm looking at this letter from the governor, and saying that he's been working with your department for 2 years. do you have estimates of tram versus gondola, all in construction costs, and then revenue projections over the lifespan of tram 3 or gondola 1?
I have not seen a letter from the governor, so I would like
Oh.
a chance to review that before I
Okay,
answer.
I'm sorry, it's in our
But we have,
binders.
but we have, broadly speaking, we have investigated the difference, and I'm not sure if we have specific numbers today on the cost.
I think it goes back to the point of a gondola would be primarily servicing the winter recreation component of the ski area and really transforming the look and feel of what everybody knows today as Franconia Notch State Park with the aerial tramway. That's a hard thing to predict what impact a drastic change would have on the costs or the revenue over time.
Senator Deed, did you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple. One thing that does concern me is the replacement parts issue and the time frame that exists there. One of your notes, you say the key replacement parts will no longer be available. There's got to be a time frame there as to availability. And that would mean that this particular project would have to go at times certain in order to take advantage of the parts that are available. And that's, I think, my key question, because if everything centers around the availability of these parts, that puts you in a major time frame, from my perspective, a major time frame.
Yeah, I think, Senator, I think what we're referring to in the testimony is there's a 3 to 5 year lifespan within the existing parts. It's not the parts that we're hoping to obtain.
Yeah, but the availability of the parts that you're hoping to obtain, if you've got a 3 to 5 year
Yes.
lifespan,
Yes.
you're going to have to.
Yep, and any one of those systems that is compromised in the near future would potentially jeopardize the operation of the tram.
Okay, one further question.
Certainly.
And the governor's letter dated February 7th, and you ought to take a look at that, because I think it's an interesting piece. It's an interesting piece to look at. He seems to look at the gondola as a viable alternative. I mean, I don't know, but from your perspective, what's the story there?
The story is we know that the governor has asked us to consider, which is why we brought it to our public information hearing, which is why we've hired SE Group, which is a known consulting firm in the industry, to do some preliminary studies on what a gondola would mean to the mountain. And so that has not fallen on deaf ears. We have worked to gather preliminary information about what the difference is. It was loud and clear to us from the public that the tram was what was desired, and it is what this bill calls for. So we worked really hard to provide you the tram numbers. Like, to recap.
To try and take you off the hook.
Yes.
You haven't read the governor's
I
letter
have
yet.
not.
So we will,
Right.
if nowhere else, she can get it from Deb, and then she can make a response via email. Would
Okay.
probably be
Right.
more appropriate, since that will give her the opportunity.
Good.
The last question that I have is, where's the 25 million coming from, since it's out of this year's budget? Any ideas?
That's where we turn to the great minds in this room.
Okay.
We have brought it up. We brought it up, waving our hands a couple years ago to capital budget, knowing that this was a big ask and a big consideration, and that there's a limit to capital investments in the state. We brought it up to ARPA just to say, hey, this is going to be a need. So we haven't been shy of making sure that decision makers with funding are aware of this. turn to you via this bill for your
I was
consideration.
good with your first answer, and so we don't know where it's coming from either. So, any other questions for the department? Okay.
This is more an information request. I think it'd be helpful for the committee to get, a one-pager, if you will, on the $2 million that comes in summer and fall revenue and how that helps the overall state park and how that would be impacted if you are not able to generate the kind of businesses with a gondola. Thank you.
All right. Seeing no other questions, thank you, and we'll get Ms. Reardon up here.
Good afternoon, Chairman Gray and members of the Senate Finance Committee. I am Cheryl Reardon, President of the White Mountain Attractions Association, the region's destination marketing organization. I submitted a letter of support via email at the end of last week, so I'll keep my comments brief today. The Cannon Mountain Tram has been a flagship attraction for New Hampshire's tourism industry for nearly a century. Fondly nicknamed by many as ketchup and mustard, the tram cars are iconic New Hampshire summer and fall experience, well known, enjoyed by millions, and treasured by locals and visitors near and afar. Our organization frequently speaks with thousands of visitors and connects with both domestic and international tour operators, and some of our greatest assets that attract these guests to the region are the world's first mountain climbing cog railway and the first aerial tramway in North America, Cannon Mountain Tram. The tram, as it is affectionately called by residents, is unique to New Hampshire as it's not a typical gondola or scenic chair ride. Since the tram system was built to withstand high winds and travel well above tree line, riders of all ages and abilities are afforded 360-degree views of the White Mountains and Franconia Notch. This remarkable mountain experience is unrivaled in much of the Northeast because of this construction. As you've heard today, the tram has helped fuel our economy, providing millions of dollars in tourism spending that has made the North Country's economy hum. In a tourist economy, attractions like the tram are so important to our success. It has been shown today that for every dollar invested in the tram, the state is earning an even bigger return on investment because the tram contributes to local job creation and retention. It attracts and encourages tourism. It supports funding for other infrastructure projects within the state park system, and all of which makes our communities stronger. The tram story and experience is also a tradition to many fourth grade students learning about New Hampshire history and summer camp programs. Replacing the tram would mean protecting our cultural and natural history and ensuring the longevity of Franconia Notch to inspire future generations. For all these reasons and more, I urge you to continue to invest in this very important historical fixture in our tourism economy. The investment in replacing the tram would be a testament to the state's commitment to the future success of our region and the tourism industry. Thank you for your leadership and the opportunity to appear before you today.
Questions from the committee?
Thank you very much.
Senator Bradley.
Sorry to monopolize the questions, but would you care to speculate on the overall impact on tourism if the tram were either not there or replaced with a gondola?
It would be, in my opinion, that it would certainly affect the tourism in our region. The Franconia Notch in this tram specifically in the summer and fall months is a huge draw for visitors. And as the Cannon Tram draws them in, then they actually end up spending more time in the area and staying in our lodging, eating in our restaurants.
Thank you. Seeing no other questions, thank you very much. Thank you for your time. Ms. O'Connor.
Senators, thank you for this opportunity. My name is Jane O'Connor, and I'm the retired president of White Mountains Attractions, where I spent 22 years marketing the White Mountains. And before that, 10 years marketing through the Lincoln Woodstock Chamber of Commerce. And before that, I was raised at a country inn up in the heart of the White Mountains. I'm here to ask you to fully fund the cost of the aerial tramway in Franconia Notch. Not a gondola, not a chairlift, but an upgraded aerial tramway. My career was spent persuading vacationers that the attractions in the White Mountains were superior to those of other areas, and therefore they should come spend their money there. We've worked to bring in couples, families, senior bus tours, and international travelers. We, in New Hampshire, compete with the Adirondacks, the coast of Maine, Niagara Falls, the Berkshires, Cape Cod, even the museums of Boston and other major cities. Cannon Mountain Tramway is part of that grand tour of New England that so many people come here to do. The seasons are short there. There's a lot of competition for people's money and their time. But fortunately, smart people over the years have developed memorable attractions to bring people up there, and it's the backbone of the tourism economy in that area. The Cannon Tramway was conceived to boost the economy and therefore bring more people into the state of New Hampshire. It fit right in, at the time, 1938, with the Mount Washington Auto Road, with the Mount Washington Cog Railway. And then it was followed by all of those wonderful quality family parks and events, the Sanders Village, the Storyland, the Clark's Trading Post, Lost River, all those ones that bring in so much of the rooms and meals tax into New Hampshire and distribute money to the businesses that are up there. The owners and the managers of all of those attractions know they need to improve, they need to add, and they need to upgrade to keep people coming back and to attract more visitors. As far as gondolas versus the aerial tramways, we live in a world of upgrades, great expectations, and a lot of competition. It's important to replace a tramway with a bigger and better one that moves more people and press tramway. There are days up there where the tramway will run even when the chairlifts on the mountain cannot. If you put a gondola in and it has to be lower than the tree line, those trees are, some of them are only 10 feet tall. There's a lot of tough weather up there. And I really, it's hard to understand how you could put anything other than a solid tramway in that area. That's why you see them in places like Jackson Hole. You see them in the Alps. They're sturdy, they're going to run. You don't want to spend a lot of money and time putting a lift up there that's not going to run. It doesn't do you any good. So you need to upgrade it. You need to bring in more customers. You never want to downgrade your business. And the tramway, also bus tours, especially in the fall, are very important. And it's a tremendous number of bus tours that come through that area. The tramway, the aerial tramway, is very important because you can keep your entire bus load in one place, control them, you don't lose anybody. Once you get them on a gondola, there's 4 to 6 people in each gondola, and you never know if you're going to get them all back together again. So you really don't want to cause issues with those bus tours. They're very important. We do have gondolas in the area that work with bus tours, but not anywhere near as many as work with the Cannon Mountain Tramway. So I think that remembering that and the fact that the loss of the tramway would really affect the state park income as well. I hope that you will remember that you always improve, you always upgrade, never downgrade, and that you have to keep up to keep ahead.
Questions from the senators? Seeing none, thank you very much.
You're very welcome. And I do have some just some highlights for information if I can pass those to people as well.
John Nahan. John is our last speaker on this bill. Now, how are you going to testify and not repeat things that were already done? I think that's going to be hard.
No, it's not. Thank you, Senator, I am. Mr. Chairman and committee members, my name is John Nahan, the president of the Hampton Area Chamber of Commerce, and you're probably trying to figure out why I'm up here talking about the tram of the North Country when I have the Hampton Beach to worry about. I can tell you in one sentence. There are jewels here in the state of New Hampshire. I consider Hampton Beach as one of those jewels, but I also consider the North Country, Cannon Mountain, the tram, the flume, as another jewel of this state. And these jewels bring an asset not only to the North Country, but to the entire state of New Hampshire. So I would just ask you to support this effort. And as the senator said, I can be a little bit creative. I don't know if it's my role, but I'm going to say it, and then you can tell me I'm out of order. But I was here a week ago testifying for a $22 million pier on Hampton Beach. I would recommend, not knowing exactly, since as of this morning, there had not been a decision made, I would recommend as a constituent of New Hampshire that you consider amending that 22 million down to 2 million to let state parks do a thorough study on the opportunity of having a pier down at Hampton Beach. But once again, I truly support Senate Bill 55. Thank you.
Questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. And we'll close the public hearing, and as soon as we're ready, we'll open the next one. Oh, LBA.
Thank you, Senator. I just want to speak on Senate Bill 55. There may need to be an amendment to the bill, as currently it appropriates in fiscal year 2023 effective June 30th, 2023, and it doesn't have any non-lapsing language in it, so it appropriates it for 1 day currently, and then it will lapse.
My own opinion is I don't think the 2023 language will stand, and that may be the thing that gets modified. So, but we'll look at that when we go through. Okay. All right, the next bill. Oh, the last bill, there were 8 in support and 4 opposed on the sign-ins, electronic sign-ins. We'll open the public hearing on Senate Bill 169 and ask the prime sponsor to introduce herself.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon, members of Senate Finance. For the record, my name is Sharon Carson, and I have the pleasure of representing Senate District 14, comprising the towns of Londonderry, Hudson, and Auburn. And I have this afternoon for your consideration Senate Bill 169 FNA, making an appropriation to the Department of Environmental Services to fund a water main interconnection project between Nashua and Litchfield. Mr. Chairman, I am sure that, as many of you are aware, communities across the state have been grappling with PFAS contamination in their drinking water. Londonderry has been impacted not only by St. Gobain, but other smaller releases throughout the community, contaminating the groundwater, which of course is the source of drinking water for anyone on a well. The bill before you makes an appropriation to the Department of Environmental Services to construct a transmission line from Nashua across the Merrimack River and into Litchfield, along with the associated infrastructure, including a booster pump station. This critical component will enable the build-out of a water system in Londonderry to get people off of the contaminated wells and into a safe public drinking water system, and is sized to be able to bring water to meet the current needs, but to facilitate future growth and to address additional contamination in surrounding communities as well. Pennachuck Water Works, which own the line and owns the networks on both ends of this transmission line, is a unique entity in the state, as it is a company entirely owned by a municipality. It's also regulated by the Public Utilities Commission, which sets rates and allows recovery for costs. Pennachuck is unable to recover costs until the infrastructure is used and useful to the existing ratepayers. This means that for the prospective infrastructure investments like this one, typically requires a demonstration that new customers are committed to being served. Communities are often unwilling to commit to projects before the supply is available, but Pennachuck can't construct anything until users commit, leading to a stalemate. This funding will break that stalemate by funding construction of that transmission line. I'd also like to make it clear that this bill does not let Saint-Gobain off the hook for any of the contamination they cause or to clean up their mess. Saint-Gobain and other polluters must and will be held accountable for their actions and pay for the remediation efforts. This bill, again, is about getting a source of clean, safe drinking water to Londonderry and surrounding communities. I know that the Department of Environmental Services here and can speak to the finer details of the project, but I'll try to answer any question that you might have. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Questions from the committee? Senator Rosenwald.
Is there someone from Pennachuck who's planning to testify?
Not that I see on the list. Oh, somebody.
Okay, then I'll hold my question.
Okay. Senator Dean.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do you have any, Senator, do you have any idea of the amount of water that would be required to sustain this project? I know that Manchester is sending 3 million gallons a day south. Is this project consistent with that number, or tell me where the number is, because you're going to be taking water from the river, I believe.
Correct.
So,
Senator, thank you for the
downstream,
question.
yeah.
I can't answer that question because I have not been given an estimate, although I was told that there was a decision made not to get the water from Manchester Waterworks in Lake Massabesic because of the amount of water they use and the amount of water that is now being taken to fund other communities.
Right.
So that's why they went with Pennachuck.
Thank you, Mr.
You're
Chairman.
welcome.
Seeing no additional questions, thank you very much, Senator.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
And we have the representative from Litchfield. Welcome, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and rest of the members of the committee. I appreciate being here today. For the record, my name is Representative Rich LaSalle. I represent Litchfield. I'm just beginning my 4th term as a representative, and I also have the pleasure and honor of being a selectman in Litchfield. I come here today, even though I know nothing about this bill. I'm here to learn as much as I can and to make sure that I represent the people of Litchfield. If you drive up the Charles Bancroft Highway, either north or south, you pass through a beautiful bucolic area that we're all very proud of. You see farms and older homes, and it's just a beautiful area that I'm very proud of. It's hard to believe that up in the hills, there's housing developments, and Litchfield right now has a population of almost 9,000 people. It's hard to believe that when you drive along Route 3A or you take a wrong turn out of the airport and end up in the farm country. But we all know that water is life. We can all agree with that. In Litchfield, we have 3 problems with water. One is sometimes the quality is not real good because of presence of manganese and so forth. Secondly, we have the whole PFAS situation with Saint-Gobain. Litchfield is right on the border with Saint-Gobain. And the third thing is the cost of water. People in Litchfield pay some of the highest water rates in the state. And what's particularly troubling is the fact that a lot of people in Litchfield used to be on wells, and they didn't have a water bill. St. Gobain came along, they had to go on city water, and now they have a huge water bill that they have to pay. We recently, Pennachuck East asked for a rate increase, and they asked for 22%, and they got 22%, which was particularly troubling for ratepayers in Litchfield. So as far as this bill goes and the project as a whole, I can't say really whether I'm here for it or against it. I know we need more water. I'm just simply here to make sure that the people of Litchfield their interests are protected. And I'm troubled, I have to say that I'm troubled that this project snuck up on me as a selectman, me as a state rep. Our town administrator knew nothing about it. It snuck up on us. So I'm troubled by that, but I've got a thick skin. I'm not going to be too worried about it. But as we go forward, you can bet that I'm going to keep my eye on this legislation.
Well, we're going to have the commissioner come up right after you, so maybe he can answer some of those questions. Are there questions from the other senators on the committee? Senator D.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm really troubled by your statement because the people have been crying for water. I mean, that's been a problem for an extended period of time. And yet you do nothing about the fact that this piece of
Senator
legislation...
D, Senator D, I think we can handle that question offline.
Okay.
I appreciate that.
Oh, sure. Okay. Thank you. I'm just...
I always...
Representative?
Yes.
I'm going to let you respond directly to him offline, if you
Thank
would,
you.
please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, any additional questions? Thank you, and Commissioner?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Bob Scott. I'm Commissioner with the Department of Environmental Services, and here for his legislative debut is an engineer with my drinking water section, Mike Unger. So he's the brains of the outfit. I figured I'd have him up here in case there was a hard question. So, so first of all, I want to thank the sponsors for this bill. Also, state up front, the department supports the bill with one caveat. I understand you have a hard task ahead of you, and there's only so much money available and a lot more asked than money available. So we do not have a position on the use of the funds or where the funds come from. So with that caveat, I want to give you a little bit more background. I thought the senator did a great job in laying out the issue. As you're likely aware, the agency spent a lot of time in the past years trying to get further water sources of water, whether it's from Manchester Water Works or Pennachuck in this case, to be available. We have a lot of issues in this state, as already mentioned, PFAS, just general water availability and water quality are issues we're trying to make available. By and large, most people in the state are on wells, and certainly when we see water contamination, the department would prefer to have people on public water systems to ensure in the future that they have proper water. With that, generally this bill, what I envision this is enabling legislation. So as the senator, the sponsor mentioned, that this is one of the few projects in our mind that cannot happen but for public monies, as she laid out. And we do have members of Pennachuck in the background here, so I think I know they'd make themselves available for questions if you'd like to bring them up. as a prior Public Utilities Commissioner, a past Public Utilities Commissioner, I can attest that they're very uniquely situated and that they cannot prospectively build pipe, in this case a water crossing, and get through the Public Utilities Commission. The project that they fund needs to be actively used and useful, not prospectively, maybe someday used and useful. So that's why I call this enabling. So, but for funding like this project basically can't move forward. The potential for this project would be to be able, again, Litchfield's been mentioned, but more to the point, Londonderry, Hudson, eventually, if they wish, Wyndham and Pelham and parts of Salem would also be served by getting the water across the Merrimack to the east side of these communities. There's currently 2 crossings already. You'll see in my testimony letter. And I also would like to point out, I provided you all with a 1-page summary with all the salient points, so hopefully that helps. There's currently 2 water crossings already, but they're sized for past usage, not for future usage. So they don't envision water contamination issues. They don't envision growth in general and availability of water moving forward. So with that, I think I'll stop. I'm very happy to answer questions. These type of projects have been, certainly since my purview of coming in 2017, we spent a lot of time on this type of work.
Senator D'Alessandro.
Thank you, thank you. Just a quick question about your testimony. I thought that there was one site that is being prepared for future usage, and that's the Manchester Waterworks site on the side of the river. That's not in operation as we speak, and isn't that for future usage?
So that radial well, so you're right, I think Lake Massabesic was already talked about.
Right.
So there's also a radial well in Hooksett that's
Right.
under development right near the Merrimack River. And between that capacity and what Pennachuck Waterworks has available, we generically, again, you'll see in our testimony letter, we've commissioned a couple studies to look at availability of water.
Right.
So what we're finding is availability is not the issue, it's getting it where it needs to go.
Yeah, I understand, but my point is that particular situation is not active as we speak for Manchester Waterworks.
Correct.
As I understand it. So that's available.
Right.
To get future water.
So if I could, my understanding of that extra capacity coming from that, there's a certain amount that Manchester currently wants.
Yes.
It makes sense.
Right.
There's, I think ultimately 3.1 million gallons as part of the project that goes through Londonderry, down all the way through Pelham. So that's accounted for 3.1 million.
Right.
Massabesic in the short term can handle that extra capacity, but not in the long term, which is.
Yeah, and I understand there's a 5-year situation in place, and then that'll be reconstructed. For all public notice, I was president of Manchester Waterworks, and I ran the waterworks for a period of time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Additional questions, Senator Rosenwald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner, if this is enabling legislation, but the proposed appropriation is non-lapsing, what would the department do with this almost $10 million if it was enabling, but Pennachuck decided not to go through with it?
If for some reason, again, a critical partner will be Pennachuck. Again, that would be the source of the water that we would intend to get across to these communities. So short answer is if Pennachuck said no way, then we'd have to explore other options. To be more clear, when I say enabling, many of the type of projects we work with, we're working with the towns as far as what can you leverage, what are the funds can we find, and to try to make all these work in concert. This is a case for that short section, that water crossing, which is just Pennachuck. There's no other partners that would be able to do that, and we end up in this catch-22. So that's what I meant by enabling.
Okay.
Should this happen, it would enable the Hudsons of the world and other communities in that area to say, okay, now I have an opportunity here, and perhaps I could leverage, for instance, some St. Cobain money or what else in the community to be able to make these connections. That's why I addressed that way.
And just to follow up, like the last bill, this does say June 30. You don't have a spare, $10 million somewhere that you anticipate using for this. Is that correct?
No, we don't.
Okay. Any additional questions from the committee members? Seeing none, thank you. And
Thank you.
We've got Boyd Smith. The gentleman from Pennacook, well, you can take a seat. Are you guys planning on testifying? All right, if you'd sign in on the sheet so that we get your names, because I do think that Senator Rosenwald wants to ask you a question. Appreciate it. Yes, sir.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman Gray. My name is Boyd Smith. I'm the director of the New Hampshire Waterworks Association. And what we do is represent roughly 300 plus utilities and engineers and suppliers that support public drinking water in the state of New Hampshire. So that's our thing. It's a good bunch of people, and as you know, they do important work. I sent in written testimony, so you guys have that. I just wanted to put a face to a name, which may be a good thing or not, we'll see. But what I noted on this legislation, it's got strong sponsorship, and it sounds like people are wrestling with where's the money going to come from. So, and I don't have it in my pockets either. But I want to add our association and our members' voices to the support for this type of project. You'll get the details from the DES folks or from the folks at Pennachuck and how many users and how does it work and things like that. But essentially, extending public water is the best bang for the buck when you have water quality or water quantity issues.
Sorry about that.
That's all right. I'll just wrap it up and say we support this. We hope you do too, and that we can find the money to make what I think is a really good investment on public water in New Hampshire. So willing to take any questions if you have them.
Okay, questions from the committee? Seeing none, all right. That's everybody on the first sheet. And now we've got the, looks like Larry, Don, and John. I'm not going to try the last names. You know, I are an engineer. We're not noted for our spelling, pronunciation, or grammar. So. Okay, introduce yourself, and then, unless you have testimony that you want to make, we'll go right to Senator Rosenwald.
I'm Larry Goodhue, the CEO of Pennachuck. With me is Donald Ware, our Chief Operating Officer. And in the back, in case we need some technical questions answered, is John Bovair, our Chief Engineer.
Thank you. If this project moves forward, is there any impact on rates for current users of the Pennachuck?
So there would, if it's fully grant funded, there would be, our revenues come in different buckets. One of those buckets is the principal and interest on invested capital. So we have no invested capital. And then there's the associated operating expenses, which in this case on the new water main are pretty limited. But there would, potentially be a small amount of, operation and maintenance costs associated with, say, flushing the water main, on an annual basis. But initially there would be little or no cost. That also assumes, though, that there are no property taxes associated with the water main.
And would there be?
Under current statute, they would be. Yep. All of the assets of us as a regulated utility in the state of New Hampshire are subject to both the statewide utility tax and local property taxes for personal and real property.
Additional
Thank
question?
you. I think we talked about this property tax issue a couple months ago. Is there a solution so that we get people safe drinking water without raising property taxes?
That would have to be something that would have to be discussed and considered as to how this investment, if it was made in this way, could be treated.
Additional questions from committee members? Seeing none, thank you, gentlemen, very much.
Thank you.
And with that, is there anyone out there that didn't get a chance to speak? Seeing none, close the public hearing, and we'll open the next public hearing as soon as we're ready. I'm going to say that he's serving us in other ways right now. How was that? Okay. Senate Bill 138. We'll open the public hearing, and I see the prime sponsor is ready for us.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, and my esteemed colleagues. For the record, I'm Denise Ricciardi, the State Senator for District 9. I enthusiastically and with great conviction have sponsored Senate Bill 138 as a means to address the PFA's contamination issues by creating two $5 million appropriations to the PFA's remediation fund. There's one issue that we all can agree on, and that is that safe, clean drinking water is vital to all humanity. I'm sure most of us have a personal story about water, and it's important to our lives. Mine started when my husband and I moved to Bedford 25 years ago. I never thought much about water in my early years of living, at least not as much as I do now. I just took it for granted that it was available to me in abundance. But my awakening happened when we went to close on the home, and we found out that our well was highly contaminated with sodium. We have a brook on the property which contributed to it, but it was the town of Bedford. Our property abuts their property, and they had the salt shed which had no foundation. So it contaminated all of the wells on the street, giving people high blood pressure, corroding faucets and appliances, and I was pregnant at the time, so we couldn't even bathe our son in that water. So the solution was they had to pipe in public water. And from that moment on, I've been focused on the value of clean, safe drinking water and the need for the people to own and protect the sources of their water. Our very existence depends on this. I have dedicated my efforts on behalf of my family and the people I serve as the senator in the 13 towns of District 9 towards enhancing the state and local efforts to construct the proper infrastructure in an affordable way to make sure the people of New Hampshire aren't drinking water that will make them sick, especially now that we're finding PFAS in our wells and landfill leaching. This is more important now than ever. Communities across the state have been impacted by perfluorochemical contamination, and largely through no fault of their own. The PFA's revolving loan fund has already provided more than $35 million for nearly 30 projects across New Hampshire. My hometown of Bedford received $2.9 million for PFA projects that are currently in progress, and other projects like the East Erie School and Aquarian Water of New Hampshire project have already been completed. In order to expand support for the communities that are still dealing with PFA contamination, we need to refill that fund. Senate Bill 138 does just that by adding $10 million to the PFA's revolving loan fund over the next 2 years, which the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services says that it would allow the program to accept new applications from the communities in need. I hope that you will vote to pass and incorporate the funds in Senate Bill 138 into this session's state budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mike Wimsatt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Mike Wimsatt. I serve as Director of the Waste Management Division for the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services. Happy to be before you here today to testify on Senate Bill 138. DES absolutely supports the mission of the PFAS RLF, the Remediation Loan Fund, which in fact we administer. That mission is to assist municipalities, community water systems, and private well users to address PFAS contamination in the drinking water. We aren't taking any specific position on the appropriation or the source of funds associated with an appropriation. Just by way of sort of context, since the discovery of contamination, widespread contamination across southern New Hampshire in 2016, the state has directed a lot of resources at understanding this problem and at trying to assist municipalities and community water systems and private well users to address PFAS contamination and avoid exposure to the contaminants. This PFAS Remediation Loan Fund has been a vital component of that effort. It was originally established as a loan fund, and then just a year later, and then a year after that, its scope was expanded to include making grants and rebates. The grants are, as Senator Ricciardi has suggested, largely directed to public and community water systems. And the rebate program is specifically identified and established to assist private well users who don't have the opportunity to connect to a public water system. If they want to put treatment on their wells to address PFAS, they can apply for a rebate. And if they're eligible, they can get a rebate to offset the costs of putting that home treatment on their private well. So this program is very highly subscribed. We have had a total of about $55 million from a number of sources that has been appropriated for the grants and the rebates. And really all the grant money has been spoken for. We have what remains has been dedicated and allocated for the rebate program, which will take a little bit longer to unwind, but the resources we know will be needed for that. So as a result, folks aren't able to come in for a grant right now, and we know that the demand for that is and will be very great. We have a number of, most of that demand will be with public water systems and community water systems to address PFAS contamination they've identified, to address and essentially to treat that water to meet current standards. And as I think many members of the committee may know, we anticipate that EPA may be proposing a new PFAS drinking water standard, a maximum contaminant level, and to the extent that that is any lower than the one that we currently enforce at the state level, we would be compelled to adopt that under our drinking water program, and that would just increase that need. And so with that, I'll conclude, and I'll be happy to take any questions.
Questions from the committee? Senator Rosenwald.
A question, I think, for the LBA, if I could.
All she has to do is turn on the light.
So I'm just looking at how the appropriations are spelled out here. Half of it is for the current fiscal year, but there's no non-lapsing language. And then the other half would be, some of it would be spent beyond the next biennium. So if we were to move forward with this, would we need some new language?
Yes, thank you for the question. So we would not, because the PFAS fund is a non-lapsing fund that is continually appropriated to.
Thank you.
Additional questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Boyd Smith.
Hello again. Thanks for having me up here. Boyd Smith. I'm the director of New Hampshire Water Works Association. One of the things that I was thinking about sharing with you is we really bridge both worlds, or the multiple worlds in the drinking water sector. So we work very closely with DES, and we work very closely with the people that they regulate. And in New Hampshire, we're lucky to have amazing collaboration between the regulated and the regulators. So I just wanted to testify in favor of the bill, and probably, you know, in addition to that, we know about PFAS, we know how widespread it is. Private well owners have a real tough time coming up with the kind of money to deal with this stuff. So seeing money that's designed to help in the private sector, even though that really isn't our wheelhouse, we're behind getting clean water to people. So, and I guess the last thing I would say is that the DES, and I think you guys know this, you folks know it, they've got a really well-established track record for handling money. This PFAS, the way they've responded to it in such a short time with such a big problem is just amazing. So that's it. That's it for me. I think it's money well spent, and it's a successful program. So any questions?
From the committee members? Thank you very much. Next on the list is Catherine Heck. Welcome.
Thank you, Chairman Gray and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Catherine Heck. I represent the New Hampshire Municipal Association, and we are here to voice our strong support for Senate Bill 138 and thank the sponsors for bringing this forward. Rather than repeat any testimony, I wanted to share a story from the Merrimack Village Water District, the largest one, I believe, in the state. They serve about 7,000 connections, give or take. And while they are receiving settlement money from St. Gobain's, they did have to undertake a $14 million project in addition to that in order to remediate the PFAS. They are just completing their large project with 20-foot charcoal filtration system. They have invited you all, if you'd like a field trip, to go see what it is, because I'm not a technical expert. But essentially, they could not be here to testify today to say how important these dollars were and making sure that this project could move forward to have safe, clean drinking water in an affordable way to the taxpayers and the ratepayers of that system. Without the loans that they were able to get at a very low rate and the grants, this would have been an unaffordable undertaking for them, even with the St. Gobain settlement. There's future maintenance and upkeep. They only have a 5-year settlement agreement, and they believe that these dollars in New Hampshire will not only have already helped them, and this is a success story for them to treat their water, but will be for future water users throughout New Hampshire. So I will leave it at that and take any questions that you might have.
Questions from the committee members?
Thank you very much.
All right, next on the list is Bill Hounsel.
Thank you, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Bill Hounsel. I'm a policy analyst for Granite State Rural Water Association. I'm also representing North Conway Water Precinct and Lower Bartlett Water Precinct, which have used regional approaches on water and wastewater in Mount Washington Valley. I just want to add to this particular thought process that when we look at the drinking water, which this is wonderful because it's a quick way to put money in and rehab and take care of wells that are contaminated. But there's an intertwining between the PFAS and the drinking water. And the wastewater side, you're going to hear a lot about on leachate and dumps. There's a symbiotic relationship between wastewater plants that take their sludge and put it on the dumps and the leachate from the dumps that go into the wastewater. And now we have going to face a big cost to address that. Why? Because the wastewater goes into the aquifers where the drinking water is. So when you think about this protection of PFAS, it also links us in with what might be done on water and wastewater infrastructure between communities. And this money might actually be create a thought process that would wonder whether you should take a pipeline from an adjacent community or rehab all the different wells one-on-one. And I think that cost analysis is probably going to be done and quite important. But if you can think, what I came to talk about on this is if you can think that water and wastewater are one and the same, it's a circle. Water into the house, water out of the house. You can't bring it back in if it isn't pure, if you haven't purified it going out. So everything you do on both the water and wastewater, on the grant program, starts to build, incentivize and build affordability in the municipal bonds that have to be passed to do anything. And these grant programs are the key to it all. We can't make municipalities pass bonds. It's in the state's interest and the municipality's interest to pass these bonds. And the people put their property up against it, and it's their debt. So in this partnership under the law that says we shall pay on the state point, it's important to move this money in where it's needed as quickly as possible and to think long-term about how we can keep funding these grant partnerships. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much. That is the last one I have on the sheet. We'll check the new sheet. And there's no one on there. Is there anybody in the audience that thinks they should have been called? All right. We'll close the public hearing. We'll start the next one as soon as we're ready. Mm-hmm. Five speakers. Yep. Yeah. All right, we'll open the public hearing on Senate Bill 230 and ask the prime sponsor to introduce herself.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman and honorable members of the committee. Again, for the record, Denise Ricciardi, State Senator for District 9, which is Bedford and 12 other towns. I'm pleased to sponsor Senate Bill 230. Wastewater projects present another challenge for our communities. As mentioned in my previous testimony for SB 138, this is an issue that I am deeply passionate about. A little bit of history on everything. In 1959, the legislature enacted RSA 149A. That was aid to municipalities for water pollution control. The predecessor statute to RSA 486 based on the following principles stated in the law. A recognition that state and or federal governments have required certain municipalities to construct wastewater control systems to control the pollution of its surface waters, thereby improving quality of such waters in the interest of health, recreation, and industry. A recognition that these municipalities have in the past and others in the future will expend significant taxpayer monies to pay for these systems in accordance with developing federal and state laws and regulations. A recognition that the program benefits not only the local municipality, but also the residents of our entire state. A recognition that the state should assume its proportionate share of the financial obligations resulting from the installation of such systems, acting in the best interest of the general public health and welfare. The proper treatment of wastewater is essential to preserving and protecting water quality, especially during heavy rainstorms. From sewer improvements to grit sewer systems, towns all across New Hampshire are looking for assistance. However, replacing these systems is a huge financial challenge for all of our communities. Projects from Colebrook to Conway to Concord to Claremont have already qualified for state support, but the funding for these projects need to be authorized before these projects can continue. Senate Bill 230 would allocate an additional $30 million to these approved wastewater treatment projects, and it also contains a non-lapsing clause, which means that the money will be made available to projects as they get approved by the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services. I would ask the committee to move ought to pass on this important bill to keep our water and our New Hampshire residents safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Any questions from the committee members? Seeing none, thank you. Boyd Smith.
Thanks again, Mr. Chair. And I remember the first time, I'm new at this, pretty new at this, and when I was doing this last session, I tried lumping multiple testimonies into one document, and then I was told, please don't do that. That's my ringtone too,
just
so.
ignore
That's just like,
Just ignore
I'm
it.
sitting there going,
Just keep going.
Not my car alarm. So anyway, yeah, so it feels a little bit redundant introducing myself again, but for the record, Boyd Smith, Director of the New Hampshire Water Works Association. And while we focus on the drinking water side, a lot of our members, they're small and mid-sized cities, they have both ends of the pipe, as I said. So they're dealing with drinking water and wastewater. I'm sort of thinking, I think we all agree that clean water is important, you know, and if you're drinking it or using it to water your lawn or whatever, but drinking it. And like Mr. Hounsell was saying earlier, our wastewater has to be cleaned before we can use it again. I mean, I know Plymouth's outfall is into the Merrimack River, and I know there's intakes for drinking water along the Merrimack, so critical to protect the water that we then re-ingest. It is a water cycle. These are big, expensive projects, as I think you folks know. I mean, they take years to plan, years to build, and sometimes they're bonded for 20 or 30 years. They go on a long, long time. And it's a big lift for, for towns that have the sort of, that have the need. And a lot of the infrastructure is aged. It's getting older. There's a lot of federal dollars now. The ARPA dollars came in, the BIL stuff. I mean, we are literally awash with federal money in the state. But to put that in perspective, that's when most of these plants were built, was back in the 70s under the Clean Water Act. And they were funded by the federal government because we couldn't afford them. So now that, we've got this opportunity where we've got money, but you still need a little bit of, I think of this as leverage. So, my understanding of this situation, I think you're going to get more detailed testimony from others, is that the 20 or so percent of a project that is funded by the state aid grant proposed under this legislation can be a tipping point for people at town meeting. They can look at it and say, I can carry some of this with rates. We've got some federal dollars. That's great. But we've got a 20 or 30 year bond and it's going to cost us 20 or something percent of the project. The state's piece of that can make it possible to make this happen. And so I think, just to reiterate on that point, there's three sources of money as I look at for this type of projects. You've got the federal dollars coming in for capital. You've got the ratepayers that are rating or bonding at the local level, and then you've got the state. And there's a companion bill for this legislation in the House, and the fellow there asked me, he said, well, why should this town pay for that town? Why should we use statewide dollars if my town doesn't need the service? And I just say, if we don't have, clean public water, clean public waters from our discharges, everybody's impacted. That becomes a sort of a broader discussion, but I don't think there's any argument about the value of clean water. The other thing is we've heard about PFAS all day long. You guys have probably heard about it for years. We're going to hear about it for years. We're going to find more of it. They're just trying to figure out how to treat it in the wastewater streams. We don't know yet. It's going to be very expensive. There's all sorts of issues about where you're going to get rid of the biosolids. So the costs that are already whatever they are going to go up, and they're going to go up for a long time. So I think the state, and I'm a resident of the state, should plan on investing on a regular basis to help leverage these other funds. And I know that's not an easy ask, but it's an important one because it's clean water. I'll just leave it at that because I know we've had a full day and I don't want to repeat myself. But if you have any questions.
Members? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you again, Chairman Gray and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Catherine Heck from the New Hampshire Municipal Association, and we voice strong support for this bill. It is a policy bill for NHMA to support this longstanding partnership with the state, for the state to partner with the political subdivisions and provide these kinds of dollars as 20% match is critical. We have learned that $20 to $40 million is the cost to upgrade or do maintenance on a large wastewater facility. It's about $1 million+ to run a mile of pipe. And as we heard, we have aging infrastructure, and these dollars do make it palatable at the local level, this partnership, for these projects to move forward. We would also urge you, as we're considering the housing crisis and the economic growth that we would like to continue to see in New Hampshire, that partnering with our municipalities and ensuring these projects can move forward can certainly promote the need for housing as water and wastewater become a critical component in housing density. So I'll leave it at that and answer any questions that you might have.
Senator Rosenbaum has a
Thank you.
question.
Could you please tell me what an efficiency payment is?
An efficiency
Yeah,
payment?
that's what the bill says, that it's for the purpose of making efficiency payments to communities
So my
for projects that have been previously funded.
So my understanding is that those are the annual bond payments, the 20-year bond, 20 to 30-year bond payments. That's the annual payment that the state has agreed to. Before the cities and towns complete the project, they get the eligibility criteria met by the Department of Environmental Services.
We'll get more information on that before we exec it.
Okay, could I ask her?
Yes, absolutely.
So are these the projects that the cities and towns have already completed and the state will pay back, I think it's 20 or 30%?
Yes.
For them once it's already complete, right?
That's
This is
correct.
Buco bucks.
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
Okay.
That's
thank you.
correct.
Additional questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. Alex?
Of course you may.
If you give them to Deb, we will get them.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I'm Alex Katrubis. I'm here to represent the American Council of Engineering Companies of New Hampshire. We're an association of about 70 engineering firms throughout the state that employ about 1,500 individuals. Many of our firms work with local cities and towns on wastewater infrastructure projects that are critically important to our citizens and our businesses. New Hampshire firms provide comprehensive planning, design, construction, administration, operational assistance, asset management, and other services to solve the complex drinking and wastewater challenges that we face.
If you would.
Yes, sir. So in 1990, the state aid grant program was established. As you heard, it's administered by the Department of Environmental Services. It's all the rules and regulations are in RSA 486. As you heard, the state reimburses the municipality 20 to 30% of the eligible cost of the program during the design and construction for wastewater facilities, plus a proportional share of interest borrowing on the project. And that is all determined in the eligibility criteria as set out by the DES. I also agree with the Municipal Association. We have obviously a housing and a workforce crisis that you've all heard about, and the more infrastructure that we can have to invest in housing, affordable housing, condos, single family, all the above strategy, it's only going to help bring down the cost of housing, which is a major problem in the state. And I did hand out the state aid grant priority list from the department. So we strongly support the legislation and hope that you'll put it in the budget when you have the opportunity to do so.
Questions from the committee members? Seeing none, thank you very
You're welcome.
much. Bill? Bill Hounsel? Oh, there he is. I knew you were there, right? You were hiding. Well, unfortunately, the person that was testifying before you was...
Edgar Allan Poe said that in the Purloined Letter, I think.
Okay.
Hit it right in plain sight. My name is Bill Hounsel, for the record, and I'm representing Granite State Rural Water Association as a policy analyst. I represent also North Conway Water Precinct, Lower Bartlett Water Precinct. I've been working on this forever, by the way. I worked on getting the original bill passed in 1989, and it creates this grant program that comes from the general fund of the people and goes back, passes through the Department of Environmental Services back to the people in the form of principal and interest payments on the debt of the local municipal governments. So this funding partnership leverages, we're asking $15 million a year, $250 million worth of construction debt at the local level. And in the language, it says the state shall pay. So We've been working 10 years to catch up, and I want to congratulate you all last session for bringing us the list up to more current position. Now the challenge is to keep it going and reliable and dependable for these voters that pass these bonds. They pass them thinking that this is the law and that they can rely on it. The problem that we have in the budget process, if you will, is that we only put it up to a date certain, and then if those projects that are almost done don't meet that date, the money goes back into surplus, and they have to wait for another session to hope we can get some money in. The DES has asked in this cycle for, I look at FY25, for instance, they call it maintenance budget. I think the legislature refers to it as the efficiency budget. And they're asking in 25 for $15,496,220. Then they project, which they're not asking for, new awards of $4,694,814 for a total of $20 million. Now, what we think, those of us who have studied it forever, is that we should have a flatline approach towards funding this program and don't have a date cutoff, but have it non-lapsing. The agency engineering bureau would be in favor of this also because, in my discussions with them, because it gives them money that's there for the communities they're working with, so that when they certify that project is ready to be awarded the money's there. And the money and the certification of completion can't be passed through Governor and Council without the money. The agency passes them together. So quite often you have a list like we have since 2008 of all the projects that then end up paying the bond on their own because they can't default on the bond. And it's passing tough situation on to those municipalities. So I congratulate you all for bringing up the standard, and I hope this non-lapsing is a new way we can do it. By having not an end date, the funds would be there in an even manner. Any that are almost ready to be done but aren't quite, the money will stay there. And you will be able to plan how much you need to go forward to meet the $20 million request. I believe with the fluidity of the project, there's ARPA money, there's other money, there's EPA funds that go to the Department of Environmental Services for the state revolving loan fund with some grants. There's also, in the parts I work with in rural New Hampshire, a lot of municipalities, which is most of them, under populations of 10,000, use the Department of Agriculture Rural Utilities program. And that's a program, well, you can fight for more, but you probably can get 45% federal grant now. Matched with 20 or 30% in this program here, you're up to 70 cents on the dollar. And that brings affordability to the municipalities to build this amount of infrastructure that the state needs. I think it's going to be a challenge to get that money out of the door, the federal money that's coming in within, I think it's 2026. Labor shortages, price of goods are going up. But this, having this money there to cause these people to pass that bond and look globally at how do we build infrastructure to get to our neighbors? How do we get a pipeline to an association that has bad water, or PFA, or ASU? It all links together. So really what you're on the frontier of doing, in my estimation, is creating a more flatline budget that future legislations could come to understand through your creation of the history of it. That it's not a budget that can be go there or not go there. It has to be there. And when it's there, it becomes as important as health and human service budget, because the very essence of health is in water. So as you look at what you need to do for health and human services, also look at this program and what it does to build that infrastructure. Water is the essence of life. A community can't live without it. All economic development creates based on it, human survival based on it. Certainly tourism is based on keeping our rivers and blowing snow on our slopes. So
all right,
I won't go on because
I think we're ready to ask the senators if they have any questions.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Questions? Not seeing any. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I don't have anyone else on my list. I'm assuming that the other list is empty. And anybody out there, the department, I didn't see anybody from the department on the list to testify. All right, so with that, we'll close the public hearing and take a motion to go into executive session.
Can we do a 5-minute recess?
We can do a 5-minute recess and then we'll take the motion to go into executive session. Okay.
I'm not getting Jeff back down here.
Is there a rush?
I'm just trying to keep us going. I know. All right, we'll come back into session and we'll accept a motion to go into executive session.
So moved.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? We have a motion second. All those in favor of going to executive session, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? We are in executive session. Senate Bill 57, I've done some discussions, and if you want to come up to the microphone and add to anything that I'm saying, the interpretation of the bill is that the bill will not affect anyone who has retired before the effective date of the bill. Reading the bill the way it is, and that the only cost estimate that we have is from the actuaries based on that, and that would add approximately $45 million to the unfunded liability. Again, I don't intend to take any action on this. I'll be quiet now and let you correct anything that I said wrong or add to it or whatever.
You got everything correct, Senator. So if anybody has any questions, I'd be glad to try to answer them.
Somebody should write that down so I can take it to my wife.
Well, it'll be on YouTube forever now, so.
I encourage the senators to keep looking at this one.
Okay.
I think that may be some news to you that you didn't know before, and that may influence what you think about the bill. And so with that in mind, we will postpone any action on that until a later date. If there's anything else that you want to testify either today or send us an email, we're certainly
So if anybody has any questions, either thoroughly or directly, please feel free to let us know.
Okay.
all right. The next one that I wanted to talk about is to go right down the list, Senate Bill 114. That is relative to payment of the state portion of the retirement system contribution of political subdivisions. Senator Rosenwald.
I'd like to make a motion of ought to pass.
Senator Rosenwald moves ought to pass. And we have second Senator Birdsall. Okay. Is there any discussion? Okay, the intent of this is that if it gets over to the House, it's not gonna have any time to act on it, that we would more than likely table it on the Senate floor if it passes, and then do the consideration in our version of the budget. I just want to make sure everybody understands that. Okay. Seeing no other discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? And
Could I
since it
take it
cannot
out?
go on consent, then we're,
Could I take it out?
sure, you can
Thank
take
you.
it out. I was going to take some action on 122 today, but with the testimony on our other bill that the chair of the Chamber of Commerce in Hampton suggesting that we take this down to the 2,000 and do an engineering study.
2 million.
I want to give you guys some time to think about that.
Senator, I don't know. I mean, this was the president of the chamber. There were a lot of other folks who testified yesterday, and we don't know what they think.
Yeah.
I think we need to talk to the prime sponsor before we.
I would think.
All right, so we'll postpone action on that until the next week. Okay, and the last one from before is Senate Bill 125 relative to the annual grant of regional development corporations.
I'll move ought to pass.
We have a motion to ought to pass. Do we have a second? Second by Senator Rosenwald. Discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? None in opposition, so that's 6-0.
I'll take that out if you'd like.
And Senator Pearl will take that out. Anyone want to, I don't want to act on any of the bills we heard today, but I will give the opportunity to talk about any of them that we heard. Senator Rosenwald.
Yeah, I'd like to learn more on the connection project between Nashua and Litchfield. I'd like to know more about the potential property tax impact that the Pennachuck expects, where that is, how much, if there's something we can do about that.
Because I'm, an official in Rochester, if the state is the one that is funding that interconnection, I don't think I heard anybody say that there was going to be an expense on the communities to make that happen, which would more than likely be an enterprise fund in their community, you know, for the water system. How would it affect, you know, the property taxes? You know, except for increasing a value of a particular property because now it has access to city
Right.
water. So again, you know, you can certainly, you know, pursue that one. DRA may be the ones to ask because they would be doing assessments and setting the tax bills, so.
Well, as I understand it, though, they would be the ones paying property taxes, the Pennachuck, because they'd have to pay property tax on that infrastructure that they laid out to Litchfield.
Well, again, I think that's a good question for DRA to answer. Senator Birdsall, you?
Wouldn't, if Pennachuck were to be paying property tax on that, I would presume that they would increase their rates to make up for their increase in property taxes.
That would be my assumption, too, making the system potentially more expensive.
So I'm not sure
for
that's
users.
I'm not sure that's a DRA question.
Well, if
Yeah, I
it
don't
deals,
know if DRA
if
can
it
answer
deals
that
with
either.
property taxes, you know, I would think that they're the first ones that you would go to because the assessment.
Maybe I'm missing something. Why would property taxes go up? Wouldn't you be paying for the water and sewage that goes with that? Rates would go up.
I
Yes.
think their property taxes would go up.
Let me see if I've got
And
it
then the
straight.
ratepayers
If
would pay.
I in
And the
Rochester,
ratepayers would
I in
pay.
Rochester get water from Farmington. We have certain, you know, and that the line that goes from Farmington to Rochester, Farmington could tax that, you know, that land that I've got up there. It could, you know, tax the value of the line is, that's, I think what the senator is referring to. And again, I think my experience from being both on the Assessing Standards Board and stuff that says that all falls under DRA. You know,
I think what we want to know is what is the precedent that's already been established by similar situations in the past? Is it subject to a property
kind of
tax, a
tax.
local property tax and the
Or
utility
something.
property tax? Or is there an exemption the way that Pennachuck is asking for? So maybe the LPA can research
I
that.
just feel
Because
like
to
we
me,
should know.
be consistent.
Right. And it would be good to know what impact doing
Well,
this could have.
I can tell you that the city of Rochester does pay taxes to Farmington for, you know, the land that we have, you know, for the ponds and stuff, and, but I'm not sure if they do anything about taxing our water line that comes in from there, so.
You own land in the town.
We, right,
Right. So that makes sense. There'd be a property tax. So.
but we probably own the right-of-way also for
And there's
the
no
water line
tax.
to come down,
Yeah.
or it's in an existing road right-of-way.
Yeah.
But
Got
if LBA can take that, then,
Yep, we'll be happy to look into that and get answers back to the committee members.
okay. Any other discussion on bills that we heard today? Seeing none, I'll take a motion to come out of executive session.
So moved.
Now, we've got too many to pick from, yeah. Yeah, it was unanimous motion and a unanimous second.
There we go.
Our business being complete for the day, we are adjourned.
Unanimously adjourned. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, the two we exact will be on the floor Thursday. And I anticipate both of them being passed and tabled.